Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Design Recharge. I think this is getting close to 130. I'll have to look and see 129, 128, I can't remember. But anyway, today I am joined by Joseph Alessio, and he is amazing. He does all kinds of different, he loves typography. He's a great designer, great illustrator, but he also can do things in 3D. He has a love and a really passion, I think, it shows for video and also for photography, and he's really good at those. So anyway, I'm really excited, and we have new little things today. Not really new to anybody, but new to us today. So Joseph has one too. So Joseph, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for asking me. Yeah, glad to be here.
Okay. Good. I'm super excited to have you. So we have a bunch of questions. We have some from the audience, but I want you to kind of give everybody a little bit of your background and when you noticed or the passion for design and illustration and typography really began. Can you give us a little bit of your background?
Yeah, well, I guess you could say it started pretty early. Growing up, my older brother was an amateur calligrapher. He did quite a bit of calligraphy, and it was never very good, but we had a number of calligraphy books laying around. Unfortunately, he and I were both left-handed, so that kind of was an obstacle in my attempts to learn calligraphy, and so I never really invested in the proper materials. And so instead of using the calligraphy pens, I would draw the forms instead, the uncials, the black letter. That you can't really get with a normal pencil unless you really, go over the outlines carefully. And so that's probably the earliest, lettering work that I would have done, and kind of caught my interest. In my teens, I really enjoyed graffiti a lot. I never did any. I was a good kid, but I was intrigued by the styles and everything, which is also, in a lot of instances, lettering really in a very pure and raw form, and often on large scales, which is fascinating as well. And then I started drawing book covers, things like that, just for fun. And then eventually I discovered that lettering is a thing that people do. And so I thought, well, I've kind of been doing this all along, so I should put some more effort into focusing on this. Yeah, so it's probably been about 4 years that I've been aggressively focused on it, and really studying it outside of just a hobby on the side.
Right. Okay. So you come from a big family, and you have your own business. You're an entrepreneur, and how do you think that has helped you or prepared you for working as a freelancer? And you could tell a little bit of your story if you want. Oh, leave it open there for you.
I'm the third of 7 kids, actually, so it's a fairly large family. Probably shocking to some of you, but I know some families that have 12 or 14 kids. So we were kind of a mid-sized family growing up, I guess. But even so, with 7 kids, that's a lot of people to keep track of. And we were also all homeschooled, and so you learn very early on how to self-study, how to self-maintain. You have to work on things yourself. And of course, being homeschooled, you're the only one in your grade, right? And so you work with other people, siblings you might read with or something like that, but you're the only one working on the material that you have currently on your desk. And so you learn to self-guide a lot early on. And I think that's really set me up for I guess a personality that works well working on my own or independently, because I've learned a lot of what it takes in different environments, and so I feel that's where I'm most comfortable working as well. I've worked with a team before, and I really just discovered that I know how to best and really prefer work independently, and I think that's been a major factor in that. So yeah, I guess that would probably be where a lot of my entrepreneurial tendencies have come from. Oh, and we also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
We had a screen printing business for a while. My siblings and I, a couple of brothers, and my dad, and we got a press with a few colors, and we would do T-shirts for schools. We had a few friends who designed T-shirts, and we would print them and sell them. and we were kind of hoping it would become, a more long-term business than it ended up being. But I had a lot of fun. We all had a lot of fun, but it's the kind of thing where, if it's just you guys, kids really in a garage with a press, you aren't going to make it too far. But it was also, an early foray into entrepreneurial behavior,
Right,
and learned a
totally.
lot there as well, both with design skills, hands-on, skills, learning how to screen print, production, separating colors, simple stuff that, I was a teenager and really helped me understand a lot of the basics behind design work that you normally run into as well.
And so music's also really big in your family, and that seems to really be a lot of your
Hmm.
pieces have music kind of influence, and I'm sure you're playing all the music in the background, and then you sometimes will end the piece, the videos that you have on Vimeo, you'll end the piece with you playing either the guitar or the violin, and so I think that's really neat. Do you want to talk a little bit about, I mean, because I would think that was a little unique. I would think a lot of stay-at-home moms aren't going to be like, hey, let's do music today and art today, and like they're trying to cover the basics. So pretty amazing that your mom really, I know she pushed y'all to do music, or I don't know if she made you or sat you down
Hmm.
and chained you to the piano, but you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, my parents are fairly musical already. My dad plays guitar. My mom used to play guitar, but hasn't played in a while. But they're both musically inclined, definitely. And my mom thought that, with so many different ages in the family, some families might do competitive sports or something like that, but with such a range, it's difficult to work with that. So my mom thought music would be a great way to have something that we as kids do together, and all seven of us actually ended up playing stringed instruments. I think all of us are multi-instrumentalists. My unofficial count is seven, give or take a couple. Some of those I haven't played in a while, and then there are a couple of others on top that I've played around with, but wouldn't consider myself, good enough at to include in my list. But that's definitely been a big part of our lives, as a family and individually as well. We used to do a lot of weddings. My siblings and I, we had a string quartet for a long time, and still do on occasion, I guess, some of them at least. I've done fewer recently, but that definitely comes out in my work. I've invested in it a lot as a person, musical study, and it influences me a lot in other areas as well. So yeah, yeah, I played the violin in that one video, like you mentioned, guitar, things like that, and it comes out a lot. Like you were saying, you can definitely see it.
So would that be something that y'all would go to like lessons for, or is that something like your dad would just teach you guitar?
Well, we went to a lot of lessons for strings primarily, because my parents didn't play strings. Guitar I picked up primarily from watching my older brother, and my dad, both of whom play fairly well. And so I was essentially self-taught on guitar, which is kind of also a theme. I teach myself a lot of things.
Right.
Strings, however, you can't really self-teach strings, and come away without a lot of bad habits. So we would all go to lessons. Early on, we went to a teacher who taught the entire string family at a very basic level, and so all seven of us kids, we were all pretty young, and we would pack up and go, and we would just be at her house all day. And people would get individual lessons. We would work on ensemble pieces together sometimes, and so
Cool.
then as we all started advancing a little further, we would have to split up to different teachers more, because no one can teach at a high level, so many instruments. Um,
Right.
so we had
Right.
to split up, but yeah, we took lessons. Um, I haven't taken lessons for a while. As it just hasn't fit in. But yeah, all my younger siblings, I believe, are still taking lessons pretty regularly.
So there was no like they wanted you to be the Partridge Family or anything, right?
There wasn't really. That would have been a lot of pressure.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think we were ready to, throw all of our instruments in a bus and travel around the country or something like that. But
But it wasn't like that was, hey, let's have a lot of kids and let's have a band and let's go out and tour or something. There was no pressure from your parents for that, right?
No, not really. Like you were mentioning, there is an element of making your kids do something involved, in anything that's worthwhile, just because, you know, you'll want to give up at some point. There was a period of time where I was just sick of it and I wanted to give it up, and I didn't feel like I was making any progress. And my parents said, "Well, no, you can't give up yet. You're still going to be taking lessons. You're still going to be practicing." And so I did, and then I think it was that year that I went to a string camp, actually, and where a bunch of kids got together and played strings, worked on ensemble pieces, and there was a music appreciation class, and it taught me a lot, and I really was able to connect to the music a lot more than I had been. Classical music, it's structurally advanced. It operates on a very high intellectual level often, and it's very difficult to relate to for a lot of people, I think. And I was having, some trouble getting there, and that kind of that class helped me connect with it and see the layers involved and everything. And so, there's a good lesson in that. If you stick it out,
Yeah.
you might not feel like it, but if you stick it out, you'll find a lot of value in it.
But that's a huge lesson for a designer or a letterer as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always super easy, especially as a freelancer. It's a good lesson to learn, so it's nice that you had that kind of from the get-go as a child. It was like, no, you just can't give up, just keep trying, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're able to play something better, or you're able to draw something better, or whatever. So I think it's really good to kind of put that into people's lives early, and I think it involves something that when I talked to Scott Biersack, I said it was something
Mm-hmm.
called grit, and you just have to keep going even when it doesn't feel like, hey, this is not fun anymore.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
right. So anyway, just me about. I think I never played an instrument. You would not. I played the recorder and I could play the triangle, but that's about it. And that was still hard for me. So we were more sports people or dancing, so I could do that. But so there's a ton of like entrepreneurial stuff actually if you're playing at weddings, or so you kind of have this your whole family has this kind of, you have a bond, but then you also each work individually, and I think that's pretty neat. So it's kind of like from the get-go, you have that entrepreneurial vibe, I guess. So what kind of mistakes do you think, and what kind of successes have you learned as far for you as you've grown your business and gotten your name out there?
Well, I would have to say mistakes. There have been a lot of mistakes along the way, but you learn from everything. Sometimes you make a pitch and then you end up, they push back and you end up buckling to their pressure, and you say, okay, I'll just do it, however you want me to do it because, I want the job. And that's a mistake. I've done that. I actually, it ends up being unprofitable for everyone involved. That's one thing that you learn pretty quickly. Mistakes like not putting out your best work, putting out work that, sometimes you do work and you're not really that proud of it, and it's work and you get paid for it, but you don't want to necessarily put it out there unless you're proud of it, because then it doesn't really represent you as well. Often there are extenuating circumstances for why it turned out the way it has, and often there's pressure to be constantly putting out work, which is valuable, but at the same time you don't want to be putting anything out that you're not proud of, because then that represents you out there, and then you're going to get more clients of that nature or something like that. So that's another mistake I've learned from, and I'm working on trimming back that sort of impulse.
Right.
I guess, let's see, successes. I actually, this is kind of a I don't know if it would be considered a success necessarily, but last week I fired a client for the first time ever. I've never had to fire a client. And last week I fired a client, and it ended up feeling something like a success. even though it was a frustrating experience working with them. But it was getting to the point where there was no, no relationship between client and designer. He ended up being really pretty abrasive, and so I had to fire him. And it was disappointing because you always want to do a good job when you take on a project. You always want to finish it out. And of course there's a financial incentive as well. But if it's not working, and there's a very high chance that you may never get to the end of the project, no matter how much you invest in it, and this person is refusing to work with you, then you have to have the self-respect there. And stand up for yourself, which I think freelancers have a difficult time doing. I know I've had that problem a lot. I have a hard time standing up for myself in these relationships often, and that's self-defeating in a lot of ways. And so I guess that's one recent, I guess you could call it a success in that I learned on the job. I stood up for myself. I had to fire this client, and that's a lesson learned. So a broad
Definitely.
variety.
Well, and I think I went many years, and I had some really crappy clients, and I fired my first client because I've been in the business for a little bit longer than you, and so even though you started like at whatever age doing your screen printing, but it's terrifying in the fact of, hey, will I would be able to make enough money, or will somebody else come around? But then I think that's where faith comes in, and say faith in yourself as well as faith in God if you believe in God. But it's like it's all those things that something else is going to come back, and that this bad person or this frustration, because it's not worth it emotionally or creatively, it's not worth it to keep having them around because they're just sort of toxic, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
good
they
for
definitely
you.
are. Another thing I learned from that as well is that you're only going to, like you're saying, it's toxic. It's a toxic relationship, and you feel worse about yourself the longer you deal with this person, because this person refuses to listen to you. They refuse to answer your questions. Nothing you can do seems to work, no matter how much effort you put in. And so it is a toxic environment, like you were saying.
All right, so we had a question from the audience. Lee, I love when I send out my questions the night before or the afternoon before, depending on where you are, time zone-wise. And so I always like it when people actually read them, and then they send me their own questions, and I always try to get those in. So if anybody's watching and they want to do that, they can send it to Diane@designrecharge.org. So Lee asked, have you grown into more of a creative director role with your projects throughout your career? And then I'll ask the second part.
Yeah, I guess it varies a lot, depending on who you're working with. I had a project recently where there was a lot of creative freedom, and I wasn't exactly the creative director in that I wasn't necessarily the one calling the shots at the end of the day. And actually, you still present certain concepts, and the one you like best gets killed, things like that. And so you're not in the position of pulling all the strings, but you can almost approach that level sometimes, when you have that level of creative freedom, because you decide the direction, you decide the concept, you decide the execution, and then of course you're executing it yourself, and if you have full control, you're doing it all on your own, and then of course, you still have to send it for approval to the creative director, but really, projects like that are a lot of fun. You don't see that too often, but occasionally, yeah. I guess I could say I've kind of functioned as a de facto creative director.
Well, what about in your projects, your personal projects? Are you doing everything from lighting to video to editing of the video to sound, everything?
Yeah, I am actually. Everything. It's not a very glamorous behind the scenes. It's just usually like something is set up on the floor. I have a background which is like a large sheet of paper, or a big roll of some material that's a particular color. And I just shoot it. I have a I got a refurbished DSLR a couple of years ago that I'm not necessarily proficient with, but I can use it enough to get a decent image, which is all I need at the moment. And so I've been able to take advantage of basic photography skills, things like that. Yeah, I've handled pretty much everything myself. Sometimes, I might borrow music for, if I'm doing an Instagram post or something, which I'm not sure 100% on the legality of that, but of course it's completely non-commercial, and so I guess it's okay. If I were selling something or if it were a piece for somebody else, that would be a no-no. And I occasionally do the music myself. There was, well, with my guitar piece that I did a number of months ago now, I just recorded the music myself. I believe on my iPhone, little voice memo or something like that. It was really that simple. And so yeah, it's not a very glamorous behind the scenes, but yeah, I'm covering all the details myself.
But I think that that's good because you're able, you can wear those hats, but you also have the ability. It's an ability. Hey, you can be kind of that one man kind of show, and there, if somebody else wanted to come in, but they also know that you're kind of art directing it for yourself, at least, because a lot of them will kind of be kind of blurry, and it's the music and it's kind of setting the tone. It's not just all straight up, hey, and he's drawing or he's putting stuff together. So you're really, I think that shows a lot of that whole range of you, and I think that maybe that's part of you being as part of an ensemble in I don't know, a quartet. I guess it's not really a band. This is where my lack of music knowledge is coming out, but do you know what I mean? Like it's like you're able to be the conductor, and you're able to tell from the visual to the shots that the camera is taking. I think that really is a blessing to you, and it's one of your strengths.
It definitely is a benefit. I've grown up very much in a sort of DIY environment. With 7 kids, you have to figure a lot of things out on your own. There isn't always going to be someone to help you out with things, and so you figure out, how can I do this well enough that I would show somebody. So as in with the case of the video or something like that, and so there's actually a piece that I did recently where I was responsible for photography, and I've never done that before, or prior to that I hadn't done that before, where I was doing photography for a piece that would have a large platform. And I wasn't sure about that because I know I'm not necessarily a professional photographer, but I was able to set everything up, handle lighting, which lighting is another funny one because it's often dependent on daylight.
Right.
But I was able to do all of that myself, the photography and everything, in post-production, and ship a quality product. And it'll be coming out eventually. No one's seen it yet, other than the team I worked with. But it really helps being able to do that because obviously bringing in a photographer is a huge expense. Something that they were unwilling to do, and I couldn't have done it out of pocket either. So, it definitely helps to have a variety of skills. Multidisciplinary, I guess they say.
And I think you're really challenging yourself, from like the one of your dog Baxter, who's super cute, by the way. Like you're, instead of just having flat stuff, I really thought the Get Lucky was really nice, and I loved the I don't know if you sent me this one, but the April Fools, I love that one, and clearly you're and here it's going to be hopefully pulled up here in a second. Hello is not showing up. Let me try to see if I can get it to show up again. But because you can't see that yet, right? You can see my thing, but you can't see that. Anyway, I'll let me go back. I'll redo in just a second. But do you know what I mean? Like those are some that I thought, it's the angle to me of the Get Lucky was just, and the color, of course, was beautiful. But I think you're really pushing. It's not always just the same. You're even material-wise, like from the violin to the guitar to the, just drawing on something. I suppose the one with Baxter was just it was like blue, but then you had just
Mhm.
drawn, and it was just kind of an overlay in whatever editing you were doing, right?
Yeah, yeah. That was all. The animation and the lettering was all done separately on paper, and then composited in Photoshop and After Effects. But yeah.
That was cool. But I mean,
Mhm.
you're doing a lot of different things. You're not just doing one thing. You're really challenging yourself to do a lot. And I think that that's
Mhm.
how maybe that's the one way that you really learn. So I think that's cool.
Yeah. Challenging yourself is a huge way to learn. I've discovered about myself that I tend to focus on um, minutiae to the point where I ignore larger things like concept, and so I've been trying to push myself conceptually more, trying to get my head out of the pencil and paper that I devoted myself to for a long time. And part of that, is that you want to try things that other people haven't necessarily tried before. And of course, there's always going to be someone out there who has tried it before. But at the same time, you want to take a fresh angle on something that you've seen, enough where it becomes your own, or you want to do something that's different, that, someone probably has done that before, but it's not something you've seen before. You can't say that you saw it before, and that's why you're doing it. So that's kind of funny, actually, what happened with the violin project. I think that was back last August when I actually did that. And I had the idea of, doing lettering on a series of objects like that. And then, so I started publishing pictures of that in late August last year. And then in early September, actually, was when Timothy Goodman and Jessica Walsh started their Quotes on Shit series, where they had all the little objects and they drew all over them. And then there were a couple of other people, Ade, a friend of mine, who did a series of things similar to that as well, independently. And then there's also this other person who I don't recall the name, unfortunately, but I think she's starting to begin a feature on Friends of Type, their blog, where she's done a similar thing where she's found objects and started doing lettering on them. And so it's funny in that, a variety of people came up with this idea independently, and they all started putting it out almost at the same time, and that happens. I think there's a term for this, but I don't recall what the term is, but where people arrive at a similar conclusion at the same time without prior knowledge of the other person.
Right.
And that happens, especially when you're trying to push limits. So that's always interesting to observe. But then, what you really want to stay away from is seeing someone else do something and then, oh, I have an idea, I'll do this. Well, no, you didn't have the idea. And so it's always difficult, especially when concepts are at a premium. They're always at a premium because they're hard to come up with. And so you want to try to, reach concepts that haven't been reached by someone else, or at least that you've seen. So that's part of what I've been pushing myself to do, to work on a conceptual level outside of what I've necessarily seen someone else do, rather than simply trying to work on the craft.
So just so I don't know if if you're reading over there, but Jason Frostholm says parallel thought. Is that what it's called? Do you think?
Parallel thought. That might be a term. Yeah. I'm not sure it's the one that I'm trying to remember, but I think it's another good one.
Well, and Molly really likes the puppy one, and so does.
Oh.
Danielle loves the puppy one, of course.
Yeah, puppies. Yeah, can't beat puppies.
but it's moving, and I think that's one of the things that's different to me. It's just a different kind of way, and you're combining two things. And I mean, I don't know how you got him to sit so long. I don't know how old he is, but he did really good.
Yeah, he was sort of cooperative. I had to try it a few times, where I would set up the camera, I would set him on the background, tell him to wait, and then tell him to come, and then he would jump off. So I had to do it a few times, where he wasn't cooperating, and he would walk off, or he would like turn around or like lay down or something like that. That's not what you're supposed to do, but yeah,
Right.
I got a good one that would work after a few tries.
Well, that's good. He
So
finally
there's
got
definitely
it.
trial and error.
Right. Well, it kind of goes, what you were talking about with concept kind of goes with Lee's second part of her question, which was, have you found an approach that works for you when selling your concepts to clients? Or is it more natural result of your process with them?
Selling concepts, that's always difficult. I've had trouble with that in the past, and I don't think there's really a magic bullet. It depends a lot on what risk the client is willing to take. If it's something really unusual, or if they're set on going with something that they've seen before, and that's why they like it. Which is, it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes they've seen someone else do something, and they basically want you to copy that person, and that's not something I'd want to do. But sometimes it's something that I've done before, and they want me to copy myself. It's like, okay, right. I'm okay being paid to execute work that I've already, come up with, particularly, as personal project. That's a fine process. Selling concepts can be difficult. I can't say that I've found exactly what works there necessarily. It's a lot of it is a case by case basis. One person I actually showed a lot of process from. This is for a logo type, and so it wasn't as conceptual, but I showed a lot of the process behind it, and then he ended up getting really upset and saying that I was focusing too much on the details, in that he thought that it was too, I don't know, it somehow didn't work for him. So I'm not sure why that happened. Usually showing process, people appreciate it. But yeah, he was the client I ended up firing, so because he wasn't really interested. Yeah, so I can't say I found a magic bullet.
And that's about value too, how they value you and how they value.
Exactly.
They're like, hey, I just want the hamburger from McDonald's. I don't need a Ruth Chris hamburger. You're like, okay, but this is a better hamburger. And they're like, I don't care. I want, a 99-cent hamburger. And sometimes you're like, okay, well, I don't make 99-cent hamburgers.
Exactly. It's your loss, I guess.
Exactly. So
and
your
the
game.
Self-respect as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, how have you found support, like a community of support, either online or in Detroit? And has any online site played a larger role for you than others? And if so, which one and in what ways?
Yeah, well, locally, it's a little difficult because Detroit as a city is very scattered. Because over the past 20 or 30 years, there's been a major exodus from the city proper into the suburbs. And so, to see a friend, I'd have to drive an hour, and so we don't really get together that much often. And so definitely online platforms have been huge in finding community. Early on for me, it was Dribble. There was a really strong and very constructively critical community there a couple of years ago that helped me hone a lot of skills. I owe a lot. Like I consider myself primarily self-taught, but that's almost unfair to the many people who have commented on whatever I put out there and given me tips and tricks. No, this is how this works. You should tweak that over there. So that was immensely helpful early on, in particular. Unfortunately, I feel like a lot of the people that I knew that were active on Dribble have moved on. So I haven't been as active on there either. I'm probably part of the problem there, unfortunately. But Instagram, I actually just joined Instagram less than a year ago, and it's a great community there as well. I've met some new people there. Twitter, I've met a lot of people on Twitter. And what's really delightful about all of this is that eventually you get to meet a lot of these people in person as well. You begin to meet people. Like there are people that I've known for 4 or 5 years now that I never have met, and then some of these people at Creative South actually last month, I met a lot of these people, and that was a lot of fun, putting faces to names, you can give someone a hug if you've known them for 4 years, and you've never met them in person. So it's great to establish these relationships, online, and then particularly to continue them in person. So yeah, I'd say probably community-wise, Dribbble and Twitter for me, and that's really been immensely helpful in my development as a designer and as a person.
Cool. So I'm going to ask you a question that's not on my sheet just because of what you just said. So I think sometimes when you're kind of alienated physically, I think that some people take a bent, I guess, or a stand that they're just going to be really just be super professional and never really put anything personal out there. And then some people really make sure that they always have at least something personal within. What's kind of your stand, and how do you connect with people? Would you rather them be just professional, or do you like that sense of humanity, I guess?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question, actually. I've learned a lot from thinking about this recently, and it's been a process for me as well. I guess I've had a lot of self-realization recently, I guess you could say, and I used to be very, very professional, very, very cold, I guess, just because I was very closed generally, and so some of the people that I would have Skyped with early on, meeting them on Dribbble years ago, and they want to chat, and it's like, I have to talk to somebody. What am I gonna do? And so I stay very, very cool and only talk about letter spacing and ball terminals and counters and things like that. And it's like, but I'm not a person. I'm just kind of talking on a technical level, which I may have knowledge in, but that doesn't it doesn't make me interesting or a person really. It makes me like a book, or a textbook basically. But then I've realized over time that it's okay to be yourself. It's okay to open up and tell people things that I wouldn't have been comfortable telling people even a year or 2 years ago. And so I would say there's a place for professionalism, and it depends a lot on who you're interacting with online. Some people don't respond well to people being warm and open. Sometimes that scares people away. But I've learned that being personal and opening up is really that's the way that you connect with people, and that's the way that you find the supportive relationships that people need. Everyone needs
Right.
them. So yeah, I'd say social media. I'm usually careful about what I put out there. If I'm having a bad day, I'm not going to rant, on Twitter or something. But there are people that I can talk to that I've met online, people I could text or something like that. But at the same time, I don't want to be disingenuous either. I can acknowledge that this happened or that happened, or personal life sort of things, and I don't have to be scared about that, because everyone's a person. You don't have to be a professional mask.
Right. But I think it's hard, and I think a lot of people who are starting out, and that social media hasn't been around for that long. I mean, I guess for some people it's like their whole life they've been in it, but so it's kind of like it is that professional mask. I think that's a great analogy for it. But it becomes like, oh, well, do I call this person and talk to them, or do I Skype with them to have a deeper, do you want to meet? And I think I've done a couple of things like that, and it has really made more of a connection. But it is kind of that step of, hey, let's talk again, like without 140 characters. And I think that there's some vulnerability you have to go through to do that, but it helps you a ton as a designer and a creative, I think.
It really does. It helps a lot, yeah.
All right, so this one kind of, this question kind of, we're skipping around a little bit because it goes with what we're talking about. But so how do you feel about projects and or clients that go elsewhere after you create a bid? Have you learned anything that you share about this this process, and it is sort of that vulnerability, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've had this sort of stretch, I guess you could say, of projects that haven't worked out over the past several months, and I've had a lot of this going on. I put together, a proposal, and then you spend a lot of time in negotiation, and then the project fizzles for some reason or another. Whether it's the client that second guesses the agency, and so the project disappears. Sometimes bizarre things happen, like a friend who was in negotiation for a project, and they were going to go ahead with it, and the client was actually acquired, and so the project was off. I mean, that doesn't happen very often, but it happens very often that a project might fizzle because there's a little bit of discord in the agency. It's a very cutthroat environment. Plans change. Prospective projects get dropped very easily, and so it really happens a lot. And I've been dealing with a lot of that, and I'll be honest, it gets pretty frustrating because you invest a lot of time in the proposals, and so sometimes it feels personal. I think as designers, we put a lot of our self-worth in our work. A lot of industries, it's not just designers that do this, but because it feels personal, like you're putting a little bit of yourself into your work often, and so even when a proposal is turned down, even if it's not killed work, it can feel a little bit personal, and so I've learned to, I've been learning really to take a step back, and it's not personal, it's business, and sometimes it might be that someone else came in and lowballed the bid, and so they come in and this other person gets the job, but they do a lot of work and they don't get paid well for it, and so it's like, well, I wish I could have had the job, but at the same time, would I have done X amount of work for X amount of money? No, because I'd kill myself and then I would feel used afterwards,
Right.
And so it's like, it's not always a bad thing to lose out on jobs like that, I guess, because sometimes they won't, even if I were to win the bid, it would end up being a nightmare project, and sometimes that happens, but sometimes, maybe losing a project is dodging a bullet, you never know, and sometimes it's not really personal, but, maybe I'm just not the best fit for the project, and I can accept that, and it doesn't have to be offensive or anything. It's just that's the way it is. So yeah, there are a lot of different reasons for why it might happen, and it happens fairly frequently. And sometimes it happens all at the same time. And then it feels like you're in free fall. Like things just they just aren't coming together, and you aren't sure why. But there are ways to step back and realize, oh no, this is actually falling,
Right.
and that it's not personal, and that it may actually have been a good thing in the long run that this didn't end up happening. So yeah,
Jason
I guess
Carnes.
there are a lot of.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. There are a lot of ways that it can make you feel, but there are often good reasons behind it all. So.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so Jason Karn over in the chat said, yeah, it's really frustrating. There's more ego in our industry than most. What do you mean you don't like what I made for you? And then he says it's hard to put those feelings away. And I think it is. I think that there's that skin that you have to get. Whenever I have a student and they start crying during a critique, I mean, like regularly crying, I'm always like, hey, put your big girl panties on. You can't do this with the client because it could be, they would not want to work with you ever again if you cry in every single critique. Like, hey, everything you do is not going to be great. You just got to keep going. So, and I think client work is different. Sometimes they really want exactly what you do, and then sometimes you do have to kind of adjust to fit what they think they need or what they think they want. And I think that comes with time. I can't remember the guy on Ad and Copy on Netflix. I know it's on other places too, but do you know what I'm talking about? It's his name's George something, and he's a really kind of hard ass, and he's talking about how when he was doing the Tommy Hilfiger um, he had that ad, and he was like trying to make him, it was his first real step out, and he was like, we're going to go big, you're going to be right there with Ralph Lauren and all these big names. And Tommy was a little uncomfortable about it, and he's like, hey man, you just got to do it, just trust me. And you know, it's like, whoa, this is big. Like I could feel it, but it is sometimes, it's like with that, with the amount of time you've been working, or the amount of success you've had having nothing to do with time but just experience, that people will trust you more because you've been successful in some of those things. I think that's a great movie. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie.
I haven't seen it, but it sounds intriguing.
It's good. That guy's amazing. I wish I remembered his name. But it kind of, you know, I'm totally jumping around. Oops, I forgot to switch back. So what's your criteria for a dream client? And would you ever just go directly to them instead of having an agency come to you? Would you go directly to a client?
Yeah, dream client. There are a lot of different criteria, I guess. I could use to kind of define a dream client. I would like to someday travel for a project. That's kind of I don't know if that's necessarily a dream client criteria, but that's a dream project criteria. So yeah, maybe that'll happen someday. I'd really like to work with an automaker on a project. You know, being from Detroit, it's really in the culture around here quite a bit, and that would be a lot of fun. You know, I'm not necessarily a car guy, but it's something I've grown up around so much, and it would be a lot of fun. Especially, I was thinking maybe with the tools thing or something like that. You know, it could be applicable. I really, generally, somebody that would let you have a lot of creative freedom would be a dream client. You know, and that's really valuable because you get to explore a little bit, and then hopefully it'll get out there, and you know, on a larger platform than you can provide on your own. There's one dream client that I was able to work with actually. Earlier this year that I don't think I can name, but that was exciting. It was someone that I'd wanted to work with for a while, and ended up working out. So yeah, that was exciting to cross one off the list, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Well, what makes a dream client? Like, besides letting you do what you do, you know, creative freedom, what else? Is it like a big name, or is it like what?
Mm-hmm. Probably for me where I'm at, probably a big name would be a dream client. You know, kind of looking for things to put on the list. You know, client list with people that have some clout in the industry at large. You know, things like that would probably constitute a dream client. So okay. Yeah, and if I would go to them directly, I'm not sure. I would probably have to take it on a case-by-case basis and figure out, you know, how can I know who to go to? Do I have something I can show that would be applicable to them directly? You know, things like that. But it's definitely something that I would consider. I've done that in the past with varying success, but I don't do it as often as maybe I should. You know, I don't pursue people directly very often, but it's probably a good idea.
Well, and I think that a lot of times people don't because they've been rejected. So one time I had gone to this sales meeting, because I always think it's good to learn all kinds of things, and they said, oh, or maybe it was like a video or audio that I was listening to, and they were like, hey, well, you know, when you go to McDonald's and they ask you for an apple pie and you say no, they don't just, you know, the guy at the counter is not going to just crumble and say, hey, I've got to have my manager finish your order, you know, but they just ask the next person. And I think for some of us, it's like, oh, well, you know, we reached out to Coca-Cola and they said, no, I'm not going to reach out to anybody ever again. But again, it could have just not been the right time, or I think sometimes, like, I always think I have a friend who's I don't know, what do you call that, on the newscaster person. Anyway, and he's like, he rocks it at our local level. And, you know, at some point, he's like, I'm just going to do the best I can, and then if I move up, and I'll apply, and, you know, you never know. So you never know what people's dreams are or what people's aspirations are, but a lot of times the weather people, they don't just stay at this little tiny town, then they go move on to a bigger city, and then they move on to a bigger city. And I think that that's some sort of what our kind of industry can be like for the regular, I don't know, maybe I'm not right, I don't know. Forget what I've said. I have a lot of bad ideas.
No, I think that makes sense.
But anyway, all right, so let's talk really quick because we'll have to do a part 2 because we have 9 minutes,
well,
if you're up for it. So I want to know what a normal work week or day kind of looks like, and then how often are you working on like personal side projects, and how much interest are you getting from clients from these personal side projects?
It varies a lot. I don't know if there's necessarily a normal work week for me. A normal work day usually, you know, I check, you know, emails and social media in the mornings, and I like to have an idea of what I'm going to be working on that day, but I don't always. It's one thing I'm wanting to work on, is to be a little more intentional with my days. But you know, it helps make use of time more. And you know, usually, you know, if I have things on the table, you know, usually there are times that you want to email people. You don't want to email them right away in the morning, usually, or too late in the day. You know, you want to be able to handle emails when they'll actually get your email and be able to read it. So things like that, I guess, influence what I do when. Social media is another thing. Usually, if I'm working on something or have something to show, I usually post it in the evenings, because that's generally when people are relaxing. They're done with work, they've eaten, you know, and they're, you know, kind of trolling social media a little bit, and you know, they're most likely to see it then. So that's kind of one of the few, I guess, common markers that I have. Otherwise, it really stays pretty fluid.
So are you, like, how many projects, side projects, do you have going on at one time? Or like the tools project was a really big because you went through all the alphabet, and I'll show some images in just a second. But like you do a lot of side projects, which I assume you get business from, and Danielle wants to know, when do you usually shoot your work? What time of day, I guess?
Okay. Usually with side projects, it varies. I usually don't have more than 1 or 2 max going on at a time, just because I can't think about that much at a time.
Right.
The tool project was a pretty major ongoing one. It took a lot of time up front, and then I kind of stretched it out over the month to get the whole alphabet in one a day. Sometimes there's a little bit of burnout. You know, you feel a little, you know, mentally exhausted, and you don't have anything personal going on, and that's I've kind of had that the past maybe month or so. I haven't been working on anything on the side seriously, just because I've been, you know, handling a little bit of mental burnout. But I'm ready to begin on a project that I should be fun. It'll be called Tools of the Trade, and it's going to be about you know, kind of riffing off of a tool series that I did previously, but a little more fleshed out, and it's going to be about how to think like a freelancer. So that's kind of my elevator pitch, I guess. But I haven't gotten anything that I can show yet. But if you follow along on social media, you'll be seeing it pretty soon. So I'm just beginning that. Like this week or so, I've been beginning to work on that. So that's what's upcoming. But usually personal projects, you know, 1 or 2 max at a time.
So are they
really
all? Are they all
sorry.
series projects, or are some of them one-offs?
A lot of them have been one-offs, but series I think are the most effective. They require a lot more thought and planning. And so I've done a lot of one-offs as well, just because I have an isolated idea and I want to do it. You know, but I think series tend to be more effective in the long run, because, you know, people will start to come back to see what's next and things like that.
Yeah.
Time of day for shooting, generally like mid-late afternoon. um, it, I'm not a pro photographer necessarily, so I'm fairly dependent on daylight. And usually you want overcast light, so there aren't any really stark shadows.
Right.
And usually afternoon.
Yeah. So I've heard that when you're shooting people outside, you want to do like the first 2 hours of after sunrise or the first 2 hours before sunset. I think are really good times because you have that kind of diffused light and you don't have that direct kind of that. So I think those are good
Yeah.
times, but also it depends on if you have a porch and you're going to have these big long shadows coming in. Not a good time to shoot.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a concern, especially like with windows that have the lattice or whatever in them. You get shadows on sunny days, so have to wait till it's overcast for things like that.
So you're shooting inside.
Generally, yeah. I don't like to be too weather dependent if possible.
Yeah, and
But generally inside.
in Detroit, I would think you would be pretty weather. It could be a bad thing, I guess. So.
Yeah, weather changes pretty quickly around here. So, yeah, you don't want to get everything rained on.
Right. Well, let's look at some of the pieces that you sent me, and then I know we're almost out of time, but I do love your tool series, so I'm going to click on this one again real quick. And then I think I thought this one was really cool, and I was really I thought it was really nice that you had the two different angles. To me, that was really a nice. So, do you want to talk about this one a little bit?
Yeah, well, this one was sort of an anti-Valentine, I guess you could say. It was sort of a spoof, because Valentine's Day, it's such a manufactured holiday, I guess, and the way the industry works, they push it a lot, and everybody, some people love it, but it's really in your face, and there are a lot of people that really don't like Valentine's Day for a variety of reasons, and so. I thought I would do sort of an anti-Valentine, and I think a lot of people could relate. And it was a joke on the phrase "you're the only one," and I actually used for my little snippet of background music in the video for that. I used the Black Keys "You're the Only One," that song. So, but there's only a few seconds of it, so they can't prosecute me.
Right.
But yeah, I thought it would be fun to make it really floral and Valentine's like. You see the flowers, the white flowers, and the this fancy script, and then the lonely being very stark and black. The really loose brush caps, as contrast. So it's just kind of, I don't know, expressing the words and the sentiment and the contrast of the day that it's billed to be and then how people feel on it often. So it was kind of a multi-layered joke, but it was a lot of fun. Took me a couple of days actually to do the whole thing, because the flowers were hard to deal with. I actually painted the flowers. You can see in the angle up close. They're real flowers, but they're all painted white. So you get the textural element there as well. So that was an interesting process and fun to do.
Well, Jason Karn wants to know for this tool series, did you use a specific typeface? Did you model them after a specific typeface for the forms?
I actually didn't. Everything was just done by eye, and I just used pretty basic sans forms. And so if I were to line them all up next to each other, there would they would obviously not go together. but since I was doing one at a time, they work all right as a series. But I wasn't modeling them after anything. So if I do words, I'll have to be more careful with that, because like if you look at the S, it's a lot thinner of a character, and the curves aren't right if you were to compare it to, say, the D or something like that. So that's one reason I never compiled them into a single piece, is because there's too much inconsistency there.
Well, I think that's one of my favorites, and I love the teal and the gold that you kind of pull in with the wrenches and the screwdrivers or whatever those things are. So the money one I think is really fun, and and it's fast, but it's just really fun. So do you? I mean, did you have an idea? Do you do origami? Like, how did you get up? How did you come up with this and decide to solve it this way?
Well, I don't do origami at all, but I was thinking I did this as sort of a miniature personal project for tax day, and I wanted to do something animated, and so I don't have the animation there, but it's on my Instagram from a few weeks back now, and there it had to be fairly simple, in order to animate it, and I was a little behind on it, so I had to get it together quickly. But it felt like a good way to combine objects and then ideas with the dollar sign, which is I guess it might be a little heavy-handed, dollars in a dollar sign, but then in the animation I have like a hand that reaches in and takes away the dollar, the dollar sign. So that was kind of the concept behind that. So you see the concept a little more in the animation, but even the still is fun.
Well,
yeah, it was a pretty big idea, but it was fun to do.
I may have shared the link. I tried to share the link for it.
Okay.
I never knew this, and you probably did because you're smart. But and I always tell my students this. Do you know that why it's an S and a line? Like the dollar sign. Do you know that? Do you know why?
I do not.
Well, let me tell you. I like fun facts.
Yeah, me
it
too.
was really a U and an S for U.S. dollar.
Really?
Yeah, and so then they
That's
shortened
fascinating.
it. Anybody else know that in the chat? So then they just shortened it to be one line, but it was really a U and an S because you remember seeing it. Maybe you don't. 'Cause you're so young. Like it was it used to be two lines, and then they just shortened it to one line. And then, anyway, fun fact for everybody.
Wow, that is fascinating.
So, but you have, and then you have this S. So I don't know what your favorite letter is, but I wondered as I saw all these, and then you have all these colors because you'll do something. And this is another animated one, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a bunch of this confetti that I had made for something else, and it was just laying around, and I thought, I should do something with that because I have this, a shoebox full of confetti. What am I going to do with it? So.
Yeah, that was great. Well, and being in Danielle's workshop this at Creative South was it was challenging. Like you and her, I don't know how you do it like that. It was like I thought it would be a little easier than it was. It was painful.
She's the master for sure.
Definitely. So then, but is this the confetti that where it started from?
That is, yeah. Yeah, so you can see the connection there. I made it all for that piece as sort of a proper, compositional element, and then I figured, what am I going to do with all of this?
Well, that was a good one. Well, and then this piece is probably one of my favorites. I know I have tons of favorites, but this one, and this is another animation, but the time that it took and that you were able to remain so tight with your strokes was, I know, because you're going through a lot of parts of the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Talk about this one just a little bit.
Yeah, this one was a lot of fun. It was about, wow, it really only took me a few hours, surprisingly. It looked like it should take a lot longer than that. But I had this old book that I was planning. I got a box of old books that I forget what I was planning to do with them. But this one was like 500 pages long. And I was thinking, what can I do to do something interesting, and when you look at it, it's like, between the lines, kind of a, it's sort of a pun. It may not make a whole lot of sense isolated like this, but I was thinking, books, and I love books, and what can I do with books that would be really interesting? And I thought, why don't I actually cut through it? And then as I actually tried it, it proved to be a little more difficult than I had expected. But it ended up working out. The book was about maybe 500 pages or so. It was a pretty large book. And I think the cuts that I've made ended up being about 100 pages deep. I had to get them deep so they would have enough shadow to show up. And actually, to photograph it, I still had to take a pencil and shade the insides in order for the cuts to show up well under the light, the hard light. And so so it's not 100% natural, just production tricks, I guess. But that was a lot of fun to do. It's fairly conceptual, and I would love to figure out how to use something like this in a project. I'll have to see if I can make that work out eventually. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with that. And then I took a photo with every new stroke that I drew it out actually very lightly with pencil ahead of time before I started cutting it in with the knife. And then took a photo and turned it into a GIF. So yeah, that's how that happened.
Oh, cool. Well, I know we're out of time, and I just love your work. I hope that you'll come back on, and we'll have you back on hopefully before the end of the summer. And just thank you so much. You were great. And I just wanted to tell everybody, I know Bob's leaving, but we have Bob and Drew, not next week, but the week after. I have Bob and Drew on, and they're talking about inch by inch. And if you don't know about it, you can go to xinch.org, and you can get cool buttons. I got my buttons yesterday. Not these. I'd already gotten these, but the two new packs came in my pack. So anyway, again, you get to help bring art back to schools, and that's what Inch by Inch does. And they have awesome Element 3 is a sponsor, Mama Sauce, French Paper, and then the Busy Beaver Button Company. That's like a tongue twister a little bit. So that's on the 27th, so make sure, and I'll probably have a webinar next week on something that I'm doing, so I'll send you a link, and you can just delete the email if you don't want to come. But anyway, back to Joseph. Thank you so much. You have an amazing craft, and that you can see that it needs to be shaded, and that your lighting, I mean, you really have a lot of superpowers that maybe you aren't taking into consideration, I think, that are really cool that a lot of people don't have. I know Danielle said, I love the animation paired with dimensional type. I honestly don't have the animating skill set, so these blew me away. You're so impressed with you, Joe. And I agree. Like, some people don't think that way, and they that's not a natural. But I think coming with the music kind of comes together. Like, you have this kind of innate because you've done it for so long. So it's really impressive.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me as well.
Of course. Well, let me share your link so that if people don't know who you are, which hopefully they all do, but if not, it's always good to. My mom probably didn't know who you were, and she always watches, so thanks, Mom. I'm going to share a whole bunch of links right here, but these are great ways for you to get in touch with Joseph. So it's josephalessio.com, or Twitter, he does his last name and then an underscore and then Joseph. Same with Instagram. Tumblr is typelimited.tumblr.com. Behance Alessio _Joseph. So he does that a lot. Alessio, just Alessio on Dribble. You get your whole last name. That's pretty good.
That's rare.
yeah. And then you're also on Facebook. It's pretty easy to find if you just type in Joseph Alessio. So, but thank you so much. You were great and very inspiring. And thank you for being so open and honest about your process. And I appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys. We'll see you maybe
Thanks
next
for
week.
showing up.
Yeah. Thank you so much for showing up. Oh, and there is Facebook. Yes. So if you see, you can like him on Facebook. I don't know if he has a friend, but he has a page, so you can like the page.
Just the page right now. I don't have an actual Facebook, but maybe someday I'll succumb to the pressure.
Well, we'll see y'all, not maybe next week unless you come to my webinar, which I'll send you an email for, but definitely the week after when we talked about Inch by Inch with Drew Hill and Bob Ewing. So thanks, guys, and we'll see you then.